At my granddaughter's birthday, my daughter and her wife told me I was too weak to be trusted alone with the kids. They packed my bags in front of everyone and threw me out. 4 days later, silence. Not a single call. Then they discovered I'd won $10 million. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I planned. And when I struck back, they never saw it coming. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The steady tick of the hallway clock echoed louder than my own footsteps as I moved carefully through Madison's house with the help of my walker. 3 weeks had passed since the knee surgery, and though the doctors had warned me to take things slow, I had never been the kind of woman who could sit idle while others shouldered the weight of responsibility. I had raised 4 children on my own after their father walked away, and every instinct inside me rebelled against resting while my daughter's life spun with chaos. That Tuesday morning began like so many others in her home, sunlight streaming across the hardwood floors, the faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. I had barely reached the kitchen when a cry pierced the quiet. Ethan, my 3-year-old grandson, was in the middle of another meltdown. His sister Sophie, only 5, tried to soothe him with her tiny hands and soft voice, but his sobs rattled the walls. "It's okay, sweetheart," I called, shifting my weight as I maneuvered toward the living room. My knee ached with every step, but I couldn't ignore their distress. "Grandma's coming." As I reached for Ethan, my walker snagged on the corner of the rug. My heart jolted as I stumbled, catching myself on the arm of the couch. The sudden movement startled him even more. His wailing rose to a sharp pitch, and before I could regain my balance, Charlotte stormed in. Her voice lashed through the air like glass shattering. "What are you doing? I told you to stay seated." "I was only trying to help with Ethan," I replied, breathless from the near fall. Her eyes narrowed, cold and gleaming with something darker than anger. "Stay away from the children. You're a risk. Look at you, you can barely walk. What if you had been holding him?" Her words struck harder than any physical blow. My fingers clutched the walker as I searched her face, but there was no compassion, no trace of kindness, only disgust. "Charlotte, please," I whispered, aware of Sophie and Ethan's wit-the-idea and frightened eyes fixed on us. I would never hurt them. I was careful. "Careful?" Her laugh was sharp, humorless. "You almost fell. You're old, Eleanor. Accept it. You can't care for children anymore. You can barely care for yourself." Each word twisted inside me like a blade. My gaze darted to the hallway, praying Madison would appear, that she would speak up, defend me, remind her wife that I had carried her through storms she couldn't begin to imagine. When she finally stepped out of her office, laptop in hand, her face was drawn, her voice tired. "Mom," she said evenly, "Charlotte's right. Maybe you should just rest in your room until you're feeling stronger." I stared at her, unable to believe. This was the daughter I had worked 3 jobs to support, the little girl I had clothed, fed, and guided through every heartbreak. My voice cracked as I tried to reach her. "Madison, I was only trying to help." She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I know, Mom, but Charlotte has a point. The kids' safety comes first." Charlotte folded her arms, victorious. "Exactly, and honestly, Eleanor, having you here is stressful. We're constantly worried about you falling or worse." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Sophie wrapped her small arms around Ethan, their innocence caught in the crossfire of something far more brutal than they could understand. Something inside me gave way then. Not bone, not flesh, but spirit. I had given my all to this family. When Madison's father left, I sold jewelry to pay for her books, scrubbed offices at night, served coffee to strangers by day, stretched every dollar until it frayed. I thought those sacrifices had meant something, but now I was nothing more than a burden, a risk. "I understand," I said quietly, keeping my voice steady even as the storm inside me threatened to tear me apart. "I'll pack my things." Neither Madison nor Charlotte protested. They simply watched as I inched down the hall, each click of my walker against the hardwood a reminder of how unwanted I had become. It took me nearly an hour to gather my belongings, bottles of medication, soft clothes for comfort, a small album of photographs I kept by my bedside. Folding each item felt like folding away a piece of my heart. When I emerged with my suitcase, Madison stood by the front door. For a moment, I hoped she might stop me, that she might see what was breaking in front of her. "I'll call you later, Mom," was all she said. She didn't offer to help with my bag, didn't ask how I would get home. I called a taxi and waited on the porch, the morning sun mocking me with its warmth. Through the window, Charlotte was already arranging toys while Madison sat down with her laptop. Their lives continued, untouched by my absence. As the taxi pulled away, I caught sight of Sophie's small face pressed to the glass, her tiny hand lifted in a wave. I turned quickly before she could see the tears sliding down my cheeks. The ride to my apartment felt endless, each passing street carved deeper into the truth. I was alone again, but this time it wasn't simply loneliness. It was rejection. It was being told I had nothing left to offer. That night, lying in my own bed for the first time in weeks, the ceiling above me blurred through tears I refused to let fall. I heard Charlotte's voice echoing in my mind, her cruelty branded into my heart. "You're old, Eleanor. Accept it." Maybe she was right. Maybe my time had passed, and all I had left was to fade quietly, unwanted, into the background of the family I had once believed I was the heart of. The apartment greeted me with silence that pressed in from every corner. After weeks of living inside the whirlwind of Madison's household, children's laughter, cartoons spilling from the television, Charlotte's sharp voice cutting through the air, the quiet now felt unbearable. I set my suitcase down in the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the walls that once felt safe. Tonight, they felt like a cage. I brewed coffee the next morning with trembling hands, each movement deliberate as if my body had aged 10 years overnight. The steam curled upward, carrying no comfort, only the heavy reminder that no one had called, no one had checked if I made it home. Not my daughter, not anyone. The silence was louder than any insult Charlotte had thrown at me. When I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Hollow cheeks, lines carved deep, eyes dulled by grief. Charlotte's voice returned like a haunting refrain. "You're old, Eleanor. Accept it." I tried to distract myself. I lined up pill bottles, folded the throw blanket draped across the sofa, and reached for the unfinished sweater meant for Ethan. The yarn lay limp on the needles, the stitches abandoned mid-row, as if the purpose for finishing it had been ripped away. On the table, a brightly wrapped children's book meant for Sophie waited unopened. My heart clenched. Would she even remember I had bought it? By noon, I forced myself outside for groceries. The walk to the corner store felt longer than ever, each step tugging at my tender knee, each breath coming short. When I reached the heavy glass door, an elderly man stepped forward and held it open with a smile that carried pity. The realization cut deep. I had become the old woman strangers helped because they assumed she couldn't manage. At the checkout, I found myself next to Mrs. Thompson from down the hall. She had lived in the building longer than me, a lively woman with quick eyes that always seemed to notice more than she said. She placed her usual stack of lottery tickets on the counter, chattering cheerfully about her lucky numbers. When she glanced at me, her face softened. "Heard about your surgery, dear. How are you doing?" "Getting better," I lied, forcing a small smile. Her eyes narrowed with the wisdom of someone who had endured her own storms. Then she turned back to the cashier. "Give her 5 scratch-offs and a Mega Millions ticket." On me. "Oh, I couldn't." "My treat," she insisted, pressing the slips of paper into my hand. "Sometimes the universe has a plan we can't see yet." I thanked her, though I didn't believe in destiny, and carried the tickets home with my groceries. I left them on the counter, half forgotten, while the rest of the day dragged by in unbearable stillness. The television flickered, but every commercial was filled with smiling families, grandparents adored by grandchildren. I turned it off. The silence returned. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling as Charlotte's words replayed. "You can barely care for yourself." My chest ached with humiliation, heavier than any physical pain. Morning light crept through the blinds, pulling me reluctantly from sleep. I fixed a small breakfast, barely touched it, then remembered the tickets lying crumpled on the counter. With nothing else to occupy me, I scraped at the scratch-offs. $1 here, $2 there, worthless scraps of hope. I almost threw them out before noticing the Mega Millions slip at the bottom of the pile. My hands shook as I powered on my old tablet, waiting for the screen to flicker awake. I typed slowly, searching for the winning numbers. 74, 23, 35, 47, Megaball 12. My eyes scanned the ticket once, then again, then a third time as disbelief surged through me. Every number matched, every single one. I froze, the slip trembling in my fingers. This couldn't be real. These things didn't happen to women like me. Women who scrape by, who worked themselves ragged just to keep food on the table, who were cast aside by their own children. I checked again and again. The jackpot was $10 million. My chest rose and fell in rapid bursts as the truth settled in. 10 million. Enough to change everything, enough to erase decades of struggle. I called the lottery office 3 times before I let myself believe. Each time, the voice on the other end confirmed it. The ticket was valid. I was the sole winner. After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table for what felt like an hour, staring at that slip of paper. Yesterday, I had been told I was worthless, too dangerous to hold my own grandson. Today, the world said I was worth 10 million. But the thrill didn't feel like triumph. It felt hollow. All the money in the world could not buy back my daughter's respect or my grandchildren's love. The irony was cruel. In the same moment I was richest, I had never felt poorer. I folded the ticket carefully and placed it in the jewelry box beside my late mother's wedding ring. For now, it would remain my secret. But secrets that heavy do not stay hidden for long. As I touched the lid closed, I felt a shiver. The phone sat silent on the counter, but I knew it was only a matter of time before it rang. And when it did, I would learn exactly who my family really was. It started with a phone call 4 days later. My heart skipped when Madison's name lit up the screen. Foolishly, I hoped maybe she was calling to apologize, to ask me to come back because she had realized how cruel they had been. "Hi, Mom," she said, her tone suddenly warm, too warm. "How are you feeling?" "I'm managing," I replied cautiously, gripping the phone tighter. Good, good. Listen, I was wondering, would you like to come over for dinner tonight? The kids have been asking about you." Her words slid over me like oil. Ethan was 3, Sophie was 5. If they asked about me, it was out of confusion, not longing. Before I could answer, I heard Charlotte's voice in the background, loud and theatrical. "Tell her we miss her so much." A lie dressed in silk. I hung up, unsettled. My chest told me the truth. This wasn't about love. This was about the numbers printed on a lottery ticket tucked away in my jewelry box. And that was only the beginning. The next call came from a nephew I hadn't spoken to in years. His voice rang out with forced cheer. "Aunt Eleanor, I heard the news. $10 million. Is it true?" At least he had the decency to be honest about why he was calling. Then came my sister Ruth from Phoenix. Her tone dripped with sudden sweetness as she spoke about family bonds and how much she missed me. My son Daniel from Seattle, who hadn't visited in half a decade, suddenly wanted to come check on me. Cousins I barely remembered rediscovered my phone number. Each conversation followed the same script. Congratulations, followed by subtle reminders of how hard life was for them, followed by clumsy hints about how wonderful it would be to reconnect. By the end of the first day, my phone had rung 53 times. I stopped answering after the 20th. The voices blurred together, greedy and rehearsed, clawing at me like vultures circling something freshly fallen. The silence I had once hated suddenly became a blessing. Friday morning, silence was broken again, this time by the rumble of car engines outside my apartment. Through the blinds, I spotted Madison's SUV and Charlotte's shiny BMW. 2 car seats sat in the back of Madison's car. They had brought Sophie and Ethan, their innocence now weaponized as a Trojan horse. The knock was soft. "Mom, it's us. We brought the kids." When I opened the door, 2 little bouquets of grocery store flowers greeted me, thrust upward by small hands. "Grandma, we missed you so much," Sophie cried, hurling herself at my legs. Ethan followed, shyly holding out his flowers. My throat tightened. These children weren't part of the act. Their love was real, pure, untouched by adult deceit. I kissed their heads and whispered thanks, though my heart already ached with the knowledge that they had been dragged here as pawns. Then Charlotte stepped forward. Her eyes glistened, her voice trembled, her performance almost Oscar-worthy. "Eleanor, I owe you such an apology. I was overwhelmed. I said terrible things. I didn't mean them." I kept my tone neutral. We all make mistakes when we're overwhelmed. Madison moved closer, her eyes darting nervously between me and Charlotte. Mom, we were hoping we could come in and really talk. We miss you. Against my better judgment, I let them inside. Charlotte immediately gushed over my apartment, calling it cozy and charming. The same apartment she once called cramped and depressing when Madison suggested I move here permanently instead of staying with them. We sat in the living room, Sophie and Ethan diving into the toy box I always kept ready. Madison and Charlotte perched on my couch like a united front. Their words flowed smoothly, rehearsed, each line carefully delivered. The house feels empty without you, Madison said. The kids ask for you every day, Charlotte added quickly, her smile not reaching her eyes. Lucas keeps looking for you at breakfast time. I watch them both, their practiced sorrow, their measured pauses. Charlotte couldn't stop scanning the room as if calculating the worth of my possessions, while Madison's voice carried desperation thinly veiled as affection. Finally, Madison leaned forward, her eyes glassy. We want you to come home. Move back in with us, permanently. The guest room is yours forever. Yes, Charlotte chimed in, seizing the moment. We'll make it comfortable. We can renovate, maybe even add a private bathroom for you, whatever you need. Home. The same home they had cast me out of like trash only days before. That's generous, I murmured, keeping my face still. But I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of activity. Recovery takes time. Oh, but we could help. Charlotte leaned forward eagerly. We could hire a nurse, get the best therapy money can buy. Her sudden shift was almost dizzying. A month ago, she had complained about Sophie's dance classes being too expensive. Now money was no object. We just want to take care of you, Madison added, reaching for my hand. We're family. That's what families do. I looked into my daughter's eyes, searching for sincerity, for the little girl who once clung to me in storms and whispered that she would never leave me. All I saw now was calculation. I need some time to think, I said finally. Their smiles faltered, but only for a moment before Charlotte quickly recovered. Of course. Take all the time you need. We love you. We're here for you. After they left, I sat alone again, surrounded by flowers that should have been sweet but instead felt tainted, poisoned by ulterior motives. The phone rang again that night. Daniel's voice filled the line, too cheerful, too eager. Mom, congratulations on your lottery win. I think it's time I came for a visit. I hung up before he could continue. For the first time, I understood why so many lottery winners spoke of their fortune as a curse. $10 million had not bought me love. It had peeled away every mask, leaving me face to face with the ugliest truth of all. Family could love you less than money. And I knew then the real storm hadn't even begun. Stay with me, because what comes next will shatter everything you think you know about loyalty and love. Like this story, share it. Subscribe if you are listening, because this journey is far from over. Saturday morning brought the smell of rain in the air, a gray drizzle tapping softly against my windows. I sat at the table with my coffee, bracing myself when I heard the rumble of a car pulling into the lot outside. When I peeked through the blinds, I wasn't surprised. Madison's SUV, Charlotte's white BMW parked neatly beside it. They had come again, this time armed with smiles and apologies. The knock on the door was tentative, rehearsed. Mom, it's us. When I opened the door, Sophie and Ethan bounded forward, each holding flowers wrapped in thin plastic. Grandma, we missed you so much. Sophie squealed, her gap-toothed smile pure and radiant. Ethan pressed his bouquet into my hand with shy pride. My throat tightened. Their love was untouched by deceit, genuine in a way their parents couldn't fake. I kissed their hair, whispering thanks, before looking up at Madison and Charlotte. Their faces told a different story. Contrition painted across features too careful, too practiced. Inside, Charlotte gasped in admiration at my apartment. This place is so cozy, Eleanor. Charming, so warm and homey. I remembered well how she had once dismissed this same space as cramped and depressing, urging Madison to insist I move into their guest room instead. Now her voice dripped with syrup. We sat in the living room, Sophie and Ethan quickly busying themselves with the pie box I kept for their visits. Madison and Charlotte positioned themselves on the couch, shoulders squared as if bracing for an interview. The house feels empty without you, Madison began, her eyes darting nervously. The kids ask for you every morning, Charlotte added quickly, nodding with a smile that never touched her eyes. Ethan keeps looking for you at breakfast. Their rhythm was flawless, one feeding into the other, weaving a web of longing they thought would ensnare me. But I saw the calculation underneath. Charlotte's gaze never stopped flicking around my apartment, lingering on the modest furniture, the jewelry box on the shelf, as if she were mentally tallying value. Finally, Madison leaned forward, voice soft. We want you to come home. Move back in with us. This time, permanently. Charlotte seized the cue. The guest room will be yours as long as you want. We can make it more comfortable for you, maybe even renovate, add a private entrance, whatever you need, Owen. For a moment, I said nothing. My heart remembered too clearly the way they had stood in this same living room just days before, telling me I was too dangerous to be near their children, that I was nothing but a burden. And now here they were, desperate to bring me back into the fold. That's very generous, I said calmly, but my recovery is slow. I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of activity. Charlotte's eagerness nearly spilled out of her. Oh, but we could help. We can hire a private nurse, the best physical therapy money can buy. Whatever you need, Eleanor. The sudden ease with which she offered expenses was almost laughable. Only weeks ago, she had complained about the cost of Sophie's dance classes, shaking her head over bills. Now money was no obstacle. Madison reached for my hand, her palm warm, her eyes glassy with what she wanted me to believe was love. We just want to take care of you. We're family. That's what families do. I studied her face, desperate to find the little girl who once clung to me in thunderstorms, who whispered promises that she would never leave me alone. But that child had long since grown, and the woman before me seemed carved by something harder: fear, calculation, desperation. I need some time, I said finally, pulling my hand back gently. Their smiles faltered for the briefest second before Charlotte recovered. Of course, take all the time you need. We just want you to know we love you and we're here. When they left, the apartment seemed to breathe again, though the flowers in my hands felt heavy, their sweetness spoiled by manipulation. Not long after, the phone rang. Daniel's voice burst through, far too enthusiastic. Mom, congratulations. I was thinking maybe it's time I came for a visit. The last time my son had stepped foot in this city was for his father's funeral 5 years ago. Now he was eager to visit, his tone practiced, his wife no doubt hovering nearby, ready to join the performance. I hung up before he could continue. That night I sat in silence, the bouquet from Sophie and Ethan resting in a glass jar on the counter. Bright but tainted, Madison's words replayed in my head, over and over. We're family. That's what families do. But families also tell the truth. Families stand together in storms. Families don't cast you out like broken furniture and then return, masks in place when $10 million suddenly changes the landscape. I poured myself a glass of wine and stared at the flowers, their petals beginning to droop. A truth settled heavy in my chest. They didn't want me back because of love. They wanted me back because of what I now represented. And though the thought ached like a fresh wound, I knew this was only the beginning. There is a certain electricity in the air when people sit down to a meal, pretending to be something they are not. That night at Romano's, I felt it thrum beneath the white tablecloth and polished silverware as Madison and Charlotte walked in together, both dressed as though this were an audition. Charlotte wore a sleek black dress I had never seen before, her hair curled to perfection. Madison's new haircut gleamed under the restaurant lights. They had come prepared, rehearsed, ready to sell me a version of themselves they thought I wanted. Mom, you look wonderful, Madison gushed as she kissed my cheek. That cardigan is so elegant. The same cardigan I had worn countless times before, suddenly transformed into a prop in their performance. We settled into a booth tucked in the corner, the illusion of privacy wrapping around us. Menus rustled, waiters glided by, and we all smiled too much, spoke too lightly. Weather, the kids, Charlotte's book club. Not one word about the storm between us. When our entrees arrived, I set my fork down, folded my hands, and cut through the charade. I know about the lottery, I said simply. Silence fell instantly, like a curtain dropping mid-scene. Madison froze, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. Charlotte's face drained pale before flushing a furious red. I'm sorry, Madison stammered. The ticket, I continued calmly. The $10 million. I know you know. Charlotte recovered first, her voice hard with false indignation. Eleanor, I hope you don't think our visits have anything to do with— Of course they do, I interrupted. And that's fine. I understand why you're here. Their rehearsed responses faltered. Madison blinked rapidly, as if the lines she had memorized no longer fit the script. Mom, she began carefully, we're here because we love you. We made a mistake, yes, but this isn't about money. Stop. My voice was quiet but sharp enough to slice through her words. Please don't insult my intelligence. The table fell into tense silence. The clinking of glasses and soft laughter of strangers filled the background. But at our booth, every breath weighed heavy. For 3 weeks, I said steadily, I stayed in your home, recovering, doing my best to help with the children. And what happened? Charlotte screamed at me to stay away from them. Madison, you agreed. You both made it clear I was nothing but a burden. And then you threw me out like garbage. Mom, that's not— Madison tried. It is exactly what happened, I cut her off. And for 4 days after that, silence. Not one call, not one text, nothing. Charlotte shifted in her seat, fumbling. We were giving you space to recover. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Space? Is that what abandonment is called now? Madison reached for my hand across the table, tears brimming in her eyes, but I drew mine back. Mine. Mom, I know we handled it badly, but we want to make it right. We want to be a family again. A family, I repeated slowly. That's interesting timing, don't you think? I become a millionaire, and suddenly you remember I'm your mother. The waiter appeared briefly to refill our water, his polite smile oblivious to the battlefield he walked into. None of us spoke until he left. I took a sip of wine, holding their eyes. I'm not angry about the money. Money doesn't change who people are. It only reveals it. And what I see right now terrifies me more than loneliness ever could. Charlotte's composure cracked, her voice rising. That's not fair. We've always cared about you. Have you? My eyes locked on hers. When you told me I was a risk, when you looked at me with disgust, was that care? When you called me useless, was that love? She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I turned to Madison. And you, when Charlotte humiliated me in front of your children, you stood there and agreed. You let her strip me of dignity while you stayed silent. Madison's tears spilled over, her voice breaking. I was trying to keep the peace. I thought if I just let things calm down. You were protecting your comfortable life, I said softly. Not me, and certainly not the truth. The truth hung heavy in the air, impossible to deny. For the first time since their sudden change of heart, they had no polished lines, no excuses rehearsed in mirrors. Finally, Charlotte asked in a whisper, so what happens now? I smiled faintly, and for the first time in weeks, it felt genuine. Now we finish our dinner. And then we'll see who you really are when you realize this money might disappear just as quickly as it came. We ate in near silence, the clinking of silverware almost deafening against the tension. But inside me, I felt strangely lighter. The truth was no longer buried under their performances. The masks had slipped. And the real test, the test that would decide everything, was only beginning. Stay with me, because what comes next will break apart the fragile web my family has spun. If you've ever wondered how far love bends before it snaps, you won't want to miss what happens. Like, share, and subscribe so you don't lose the rest of this journey. By the time I left Romano's that night, I had already made up my mind. For 72 years, I had carried the weight of family on my shoulders. Sacrifices, sleepless nights, endless labor. And in return, when I needed them most, I had been discarded. Now fortune had tilted the scale, and I would use it not to punish them, but to see them clearly. The following morning, I called my lawyer, Margaret Sullivan, a woman with sharp eyes and a steady voice who had handled my will years ago. She greeted me warmly over the phone. Congratulations on your win, Eleanor. I imagine things must feel overwhelming. That's exactly why I need you, I told her. An hour later, I sat in her office, the blinds drawn against the Texas sun. As I explained my plan, her brows arched higher and higher, though she didn't interrupt. Only when I finished did she lean back, folding her hands. It's unconventional. Are you certain you want to do this? I met her gaze. I've spent a lifetime giving without question. It's time to ask for answers. Real ones. Margaret studied me a moment longer, then nodded. Very well. I'll help you. That Sunday, the family gathered in my apartment. The scent of expensive catered food filled the air, dishes from the best restaurant in the city laid out across my small table. They arrived dressed as though attending a gala rather than a family dinner. Daniel wore a pressed shirt, his wife Jennifer clutching an oversized gift bag. Ruth swept in with a silk scarf and a bottle of wine, her smile dazzling but hollow. Madison and Charlotte, of course, arrived hand in hand with Sophie and Ethan, their faces glowing with the innocence their parents lacked. As the meal unfolded, I watched them. Daniel and Charlotte gravitated toward each other, murmuring about financial security and long-term care. Jennifer and Ruth discussed investment strategies like two traders circling the same prize. Madison flitted between conversations, careful to appear neutral, careful to appear loyal. I let it play out. I let them eat, drink, and chatter. When the dishes were cleared, I stood and tapped my glass lightly with a fork. The room quieted instantly, every face turning toward me. I want to thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steady. It means a great deal to have family around me during this transition. I've been listening carefully these past days, and I've heard your concerns. So tonight, I want to give you what you've asked for. From my purse, I drew a stack of envelopes, each one labeled with a name. Their eyes widened, bodies leaning forward as if pulled by a string. Daniel, I said, handing him the first. You wanted me near you in Seattle, in a top-tier assisted living facility. Inside your envelope is enough to cover the deposit and the first year's fees for the one you recommended. He fumbled it open, his breath catching when he saw the check. It was real. Charlotte, I continued, turning to her, you wrote me a beautiful letter about investing in the family's future. In your envelope is $75,000 toward the new house you described, with its separate wing for me. Her hands trembled as she pulled the paper free. Ruth, I said, offering her another, you spoke of traveling together, of finally taking that European cruise we always dreamed of. This will cover both our tickets. One by one, I handed out the envelopes. Jennifer's contained funds for the financial planning services she had so eagerly offered to coordinate. Madison's held money for her children's future. Education secured far beyond her own means. The room filled with the faint rustle of checks unfolding, their silence broken only by shallow breaths and darting eyes. There's one condition, I said finally. Every head snapped toward me. You can keep the money and walk away, or you can return it to me tomorrow evening. If you return it, you prove that what you want is me, not my bank account. If you keep it, then we all have our answer. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I could almost hear their thoughts, their calculations, the frantic math of greed colliding with guilt. You have until tomorrow night, I finished. After that, the choice is sealed. Slowly, the dinner dissolved. They filed out one by one, envelopes clutched tight, eyes avoiding mine. Not one of them said goodbye. Not one met my gaze. When the door closed behind the last of them, I stood alone in my quiet apartment. The table still bore the remnants of expensive food, untouched desserts, half-empty glasses. Yet all I could feel was the weight of truth pressing closer. By tomorrow, I would know. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching rain streak down the glass. For the first time in months, I felt calm. Whatever came, whatever choice they made, I would finally see who my family truly was. The next evening arrived with a heaviness that clung to the air. I sat in my apartment, the clock ticking loudly in the silence. Waiting, I had left the envelopes on the table, as though their return might feel inevitable, as though family bonds might prove stronger than greed. But the hours slipped by, and the door never knocked. Midnight came and went. By Tuesday, my phone remained silent. By Wednesday, the answers revealed themselves not through returned checks, but through the lives they now flaunted. Daniel posted photos of waterfront houses in Seattle, his captions filled with excitement. New adventures ahead. Charlotte appeared at my door in a newer BMW, not fresh from the dealership, but far beyond what she once claimed they could afford. Ruth called with bubbling joy to tell me she had booked the cruise we had once whispered about when we were girls. Her voice thick with dreams, thin with sincerity. Not one of them brought back their envelope. Not one chose me, except Madison. She arrived late Thursday evening, her eyes swollen, her shoulders slumped. When she stepped inside, she reached into her purse and pulled out the envelope, still sealed. "I haven't cashed it," she whispered, setting it on the table like it burned her hands. "I keep starting to, and then I stop. I keep thinking about what you said." I studied her carefully. For the first time in weeks, she seemed stripped bare of performance, her voice trembling, not from rehearsal, but from regret. "Charlotte cashed hers," she continued, eyes darting toward the floor. "She said you were being manipulative, that you were using money to control us. Daniel called you bitter and vindictive. They don't understand what you were doing, but I think I do." "What do you think I was doing?" I asked softly. She swallowed hard. "You're tired of being taken for granted. You wanted to see who we really are when there's something at stake." It was the most honest thing anyone in my family had said in years. "Madison," I said gently, "tell me the truth about that day. When Charlotte screamed at me, when I stumbled, what really happened?" Her voice cracked as the tears finally spilled. "You were trying to help Ethan, and you tripped. Charlotte overreacted, and instead of defending you, I stayed quiet. I chose her. I let her humiliate you because it was easier than fighting." She drew a ragged breath. "Because it was easier to lose you than to risk losing her." I reached across the table, my hand covering hers. "You're not a coward. You're human. We all make choices that protect what feels most fragile in our lives. But you chose wrong." Her tears fell harder. "I know, and I don't know how to fix it." I squeezed her hand. "You fix it by being honest, by standing up when it matters. You fix it by showing me that respect will no longer be optional." She stared at me, the weight of her guilt pressing down, the little girl in her eyes surfacing, the one who had watched her father walk out, who learned that sometimes love disappears overnight. "Keep the check," I said softly. Her head jerked up in shock. "What? No, I can't." "Yes, you can," I interrupted firmly. "But not because I'm buying your love. Keep it because you're my daughter, and I want you to be safe. I want you to know that no matter what happens in your marriage, no matter what choices you make, you'll be okay. That's what mothers do." She broke then, sobbing into her hands, her body trembling with years of buried shame. "I don't deserve it," she choked. "You treated me like someone who would always be there no matter what," I told her. "And you were right. I will always be here, but this time, on my terms." We spoke for hours, more honestly than we had in decades. She confessed that Charlotte had resented our closeness from the beginning, always searching for ways to wedge us apart. She admitted her marriage had grown fragile after betrayals, that she clung to peace even when it meant sacrificing me. I listened, my heart both breaking and healing at once. For the first time, I saw not just the woman, but the frightened child still living inside her. When she left that night, the envelope remained on my table, unopened, a test she had not yet failed. And as the door closed, I realized something that chilled and comforted me at once. Money had revealed the truth. But it was love, or the absence of it, that would decide what came next. So stay with me, because the story is about to turn. What Eleanor does after betrayal will not just change her family, it will change her life forever. Like, share, and subscribe if you're listening, because this is where everything begins to transform. The morning after Madison's visit, I woke with a strange clarity, as though a fog that had clouded me for weeks had finally lifted. The test was over. My family had made their choices. Some had chosen money, some had chosen silence. Only one stood before me, uncertain but willing to try, and for the first time in a long while I understood what I needed to do. I called Margaret Sullivan that same morning. Her voice was crisp, professional, but I caught the flicker of approval when I told her my decision. "I want legal boundaries," I said firmly. "I don't want anyone managing my money. I don't want suggestions disguised as concern. My finances, my choices, my life." She smiled. "I'll draw up the documents, ironclad." By the end of the week, the papers were signed. No one but me had authority, not Madison, not Daniel, not Charlotte. Freedom had never looked so official. The following month I moved, not to a mansion, not to a glass tower downtown, but to a modest house in a retirement community 40 minutes outside the city. Close enough for visits, far enough to make casual manipulation inconvenient. The moment I stepped inside, I felt a weight roll off my shoulders. The house had a screened porch where I could sit in the evenings and watch the sky fade to pink. It had a garden patch begging for tomatoes and herbs, dirt waiting for my hands. It had two small guest rooms, not for opportunists, but for those who came out of love, not greed. And most of all, it was mine. Completely, wholly, legally mine. Within weeks, life began to take on a rhythm I had thought forever lost. I planted roses along the walkway, their blooms bright and defiant against the Texas sun. I bought furniture that fit me, not anyone else's vision of comfort. For the first time, every corner of my home reflected who I was, not who others wanted me to be. Madison visited cautiously at first. Sometimes she brought Sophie and Ethan. Sometimes she came alone, her hands wrapped tightly around a coffee mug as if it were a shield. Our conversations were halting, careful, but genuine. She began to share truths she had buried for years. The guilt that gnawed at her. The fear that standing up to Charlotte might shatter everything she had built. One afternoon, she admitted softly, "I was so afraid you'd stop loving me if I chose her over you." I took her hand. "I will never stop loving you. But I won't allow you to treat me as if my love excuses disrespect. Those days are gone." She nodded through tears. For once, I believed she understood. The children adapted quickly, their innocence untarnished by adult mistakes. Sophie loved helping me in the garden, her laughter ringing as she carried watering cans almost too big for her small arms. Ethan became obsessed with puzzle games I kept on a shelf, his little brow furrowed in concentration, before breaking into wide smiles when he succeeded. They called my house Grandma's Castle, a name that clung to the walls like sunlight. Charlotte came less often. When she did, her posture was stiff, her voice clipped. She learned quickly that her sharpness earned nothing here, that my home did not bend to her authority. She remained civil, if only because she understood what respectlessness would cost her. For the first time, I saw her not as a gatekeeper to my daughter, but as a woman who had lost her power over me. Daniel's presence faded into postcards at Christmas, his carefully scripted words colder than any winter in Seattle. Ruth sent cheerful notes from Europe, her cruise pictures filled with sparkling seas and empty promises. Their absence left no wound. They had chosen, and I no longer mourned what they had discarded. It was Mrs. Thompson, my neighbor from the old apartment, who became my truest companion. She visited often, bringing gossip and laughter, sometimes slipping me another lottery ticket with a conspiratorial wink. "You never know," she would say, her eyes sparkling. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sky burn with sunset, she asked me, "Do you regret it? The test you gave them?" I thought about her question, the silence stretching between us. "I regret that it was necessary," I said finally, "but I don't regret knowing the truth." She nodded slowly, her face lined with understanding. Months passed, and life softened. My garden bloomed, my evenings filled with children's laughter. My mornings began with quiet coffee and the knowledge that I was exactly where I belonged. Not in a guest room where whispers judged me, not in a house where my worth was measured against my usefulness. Here, in a place built by my own hands, I was more than useful. I was free. For the first time since my surgery, I no longer felt broken. I felt whole. Autumn crept in quietly, the air turning crisp, the evenings shorter, the leaves outside my porch trembling in shades of gold and red. I found comfort in the rhythm of the seasons, each day grounding me more firmly in the life I had chosen. The calls from Daniel grew rarer until they disappeared entirely. Ruth's postcards eventually stopped too, the last one depicting a glittering Paris night that carried no more warmth than the glossy paper it was printed on. Charlotte still appeared from time to time, her smile tight, her words measured, but even she seemed to sense that her grip on Madison had weakened. In my home, I held the authority. In my presence, her games lost their power. Madison continued to come. Sometimes she brought the children. Sometimes she came alone. Our talks were not always easy. There were nights she cried, confessing the failures she couldn't forgive herself for. the compromises she made to preserve appearances. But with each visit, I saw a shift. The shame that once bent her shoulders slowly lifted, replaced by something steadier, braver. One Saturday afternoon, she brought Sophie and Ethan over for a sleepover. We cooked together, the kitchen filled with laughter and the smell of chocolate chip cookies. Later, as I tucked the children into bed, Sophie clung to me and whispered, "Grandma, promise you'll never leave." I kissed her forehead. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart." When Madison came to check on them, her eyes glistened as she overheard. For the first time in a long while, she didn't apologize or explain. She simply took my hand, and I understood. She was learning. Life in the retirement community unfolded gently. I joined a book club, discovered new friends, even tried a watercolor class despite my clumsy hands. Mrs. Thompson remained my steadfast companion, our evenings on the porch filled with laughter and the comfort of shared silence. One evening, she leaned back in her chair, studying me with sharp but kind eyes. "So, Eleanor, do you feel rich yet?" I laughed softly, sipping my tea. "Richer than I've ever been, and it has nothing to do with the numbers in my bank account." We sat quietly, watching the stars emerge one by one. My heart felt lighter, not because the wounds had vanished, but because I had stopped carrying the weight of denial. The money had not changed me. It had revealed the truth about those around me. Painful as it was, the truth had set me free. I had once feared that winning the lottery would be a curse, a beacon attracting greed and false affection. And in many ways, it had been. But it had also been a mirror, forcing me to see what I had avoided for years. Love cannot be bought, loyalty cannot be begged, and family is not always defined by blood. As the cool night wrapped around me, I whispered into the darkness, more to myself than anyone else. "I am enough. I always have been." The words lingered in the air, quiet but powerful, and for the first time in decades, I believed them. This is where my story settles, not with riches flaunted, not with regret consuming me, but with peace, earned, hard-won, and unshakable. So if you've walked with me through these chapters, let my journey remind you of this. Your worth is never determined by what you give away, nor by what others demand. It is written in who you are, in the strength you carry, even when others try to strip it from you. Stay with me in spirit, carry this lesson forward, and remember, you too deserve to live on your own terms. Share this story, hold it close, let it remind you that freedom begins the moment you choose yourself.